Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Freese, the mayor of Tonganoxie. I'm calling to order this regular meeting of the Tonganoxie City Council for November 20, 2023. Mr. Porter, will you note that I am present and call the roll, please?
Ms. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly.
Here.
Mr. Dale.
Here.
Ms. McCutcheon and Mr. Partridge are absent, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Would you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Item 2 on our agenda is the approval of minutes from the previous meeting dated November 6, 2023. Are there any conversation about the minutes, or is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
Well, I will second that.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Did you have reservations?
Well, I wasn't here.
Oh, okay.
Nobody else to second it.
I appreciate it.
Jake wasn't here either.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. 1 second, please. Item 3 on our agenda is the consent agenda, where we review the bill payments from the previous period. Is there any questions or conversation about the bill payments? If not, I'd be seeking a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Old business, we have none, but this is also the time of the meeting when we ask if there was anyone who wanted to speak for a few minutes.
No signups.
Thank you so much. Oh, no signups. We have no signups to speak, so we'll move on to new business. The public meeting, which is item A, the public meeting, present and discuss the alternatives for the wastewater treatment plant project with improvements funded under the low-interest state revolving loan fund program through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. Mr. Monaco, Mr. Monaco, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Daniel Monaco with BG Consultants, and as the Mayor stated, we are here to have a public meeting this evening to discuss the alternatives we may look at with the wastewater treatment facility improvements. And you have a sheet.
Mr. Monaco,
Yes.
thank you very much. I apologize. I just want to make sure clear that this is the public meeting for this item.
Yes.
Thank you.
And you'll have this here, and we'll go through these, and they'll also be up on the top. But what we want to, so as part of the state revolving loan fund, there are certain administrative portions that are required as part of that. And in our application in September, there are certain steps that we need to take, and this is one of them. And we'll also have a public hearing after this as well. And this is to inform the city council, the city residents, and city staff of what we're looking at. This specifically being the public meeting is to discuss those alternatives. There'll be additional information that'll be brought forward during the hearing. So the very first one is a summary, an overview of the entire facility. Each component there is listed and shown. And if you look in the top center, the influent pump station, that's the first part of where the plant, quote, starts. The collection system gathers all the wastewater of the community, and that influent pump station is where everything hits. That is then, because that is a gravity system, it's deeper. It drops into there, pumps in. It goes into the headworks building, which includes a screening and a washer compactor. And it also has what's called a grit classifier housed inside of that. The grit system is actually directly outside of that. but the wastewater is pumped up, goes through the screening, goes through the grit. Any grit that's collected is sent back to the classifier. What that does is wash it and lets it dry, and then it drops into a dumpster. Outside of that is, after the grit chambers, there's a splitter that'll go through. And then primarily it drops straight south, which south is down. And it goes around the big circle digester, and it goes into the major process there, the aeration basin. And it will go through there. That's the primary workhorse. And then after that, it will go through the final, the liquid stream will go through the final clarifiers, the UV disinfection, and then out, effluent, treated effluent. Within the aeration basin, there is a part of the biological process creates a sludge, biosolids. Those will drop through, it's dropped into the clarifier drops those solids. We grab those out of what's called the RAS-WAS pump, which is the small building to the north and west of the clarifiers, the round clarifiers. That is then pumped back up into, the solids are pumped back into the aerated sludge basin, which are directly north of the big treatment basin. That's kind of a quick summary of the system. And what we're looking at, you also have the administrative building, which is west of the digester. That also has what's called sludge dewatering equipment within that. So you treat that sludge, then the city dewaters that because that goes to a landfill. You pay per pound, you don't want to pay for water. So that's kind of the overall process. To the east, you'll see two small racetracks that are close together. Was the old plant prior to this generation that came about. They are still in use in an emergency overflow basin scenario. So if the flow that comes into the plant exceeds the ability to pump it up and out, instead of backing it all the way up into the community, it will there's a pipe that comes out of the influent pump station that will drop all that water into those overflow basins. That actually is a very good part of your system. You hope you don't need it, but when you do, you're sure glad you have it. So real quick, is there any questions on that summary? Okay.
No, sir.
So we'll go to the next page. What we've done is we've gone through this process is we've identified certain portions of the projects, and we kind of broke those down into different phases, or i.e. priorities. So through the process, this second page is the phase one improvements. And what we're looking at there, the aeration basin, the biggest part of this project is capacity. It's capacity limited when the expected flows will be hitting the system. And as other flows may come into the community, we're really going to be pushing that single system to its limit. So we're going to double that aeration basin. It'll be similar size. There will be some nuances in the new one in compared to the old one, but we'll work those together as we go through there. That is project number one. Project number two is the aerobic digester, which is the round to the northwest of that. That's where all the biosolids go. Your current process is what we call floating aerator, and it sits on top of the sludge and spins and incorporates air into that. That is when that was built, that's a very economic way to do things. It's not always the most efficient way. And I know as well as the staff has worked to keep that system running in the winter, it just doesn't work very well. So in fact, over the last few years, the city staff has worked hard at being able to keep their system running but having that system actually offline during the winter. And I will tell you, in a biological system, That can be touchy, and they've done a really good job with it. So what we're going to do is put in a more efficient system. It'll be a diffused air system. It'll be piping that will go down to the bottom. They'll have small round diffusers that will have fine bubble that will come up through. It's a much more efficient process. It allows the oxygen to transfer a whole lot easier within that basin. And it will be something that can be utilized. It can be taken down in different ways and serviced in the future. And we'll talk about future components because there will be another one through there. This will require blowers that will be pushing the air into. That'll be part of, so that's project 2. Project 3 is actually called the SCADA. That's the brains of the system. The city has their integrator that they've worked with for a long time. And we've been in concert with them about, they've done some recent upgrades, which has helped the system. And we've worked with them understanding what we're looking at in the short term and long term out at that. So there'll be some specific improvements that'll be required as part of that. And then the phase 1, project 4, currently it's a 4-pump system, but there's 2 smaller pumps, the originals, and the city a few years ago replaced that with a larger flow pump. We will be replacing those smaller ones and adding the 4th one as part of this project. And then the phase 1-5, that's UV system upgrades. There's some glitches on there we're trying to work through that will allow an easier flow efficiency through that system. It's an important part of it that UV is high intensity ultraviolet light, and you want to always make sure those bulbs are covered with water so it helps cool. And that's some of the problems. The staff has set that so that it's not as automated as it used to be, because it just isn't working that way anymore. So all pieces of that are 20-plus years old. They've worked very well. But the major parts of this is we're trying to gain capacity and efficiencies in the system. So real quick, any questions on the phase 1? Yes.
The unit that gets taken offline in the winter,
Yes.
the new system, is that usable year round?
Yes. Yes. Yep. That's the other thing. You're pushing air in and it comes up from the bottom. It stays within that. The system now sprays stuff inside that, and it gets
Freeze
froze
up.
up. So yeah, it's not only more efficient, it's more operationally a better scenario. So we'll go to the 3rd page. These are what we identified as phase 1A. Once again, maybe a little bit at the time, a little less priority, but still an important part of it. So the phase 1, project A, that included looking at the headworks with the grit chamber and the classifier. That may be something that we need to look at as we go through there. The phase 1 additional B is a RAS pump upgrade, and what the RAS is a return activated. That's the yellow one down by the final clarifiers. So there's 2 types of pumps in there. There's what's called wasting pumps. Those are the ones that take the solids out from the bottom of the clarifier, and they pump them up to the digester. So that's how we move the solids to the digester. What the RAS is it actually takes clean, treated water out of the clarifier and returns it back up into the system, because that helps that efficiency within that. So the water gets treated multiple times before it ends up going out. So that's how we work those and design that system. And then the clarifier upgrades, the clarifier launders, they're open to air and to sunlight. It's a nutrient-rich environment, and so you get a lot of growth on those. And what's important about that, as far as the biological treatment, it really doesn't do anything to hurt the system, but that stuff will break off and go, well, right down the line, it goes through the UV. The UV doesn't do anything with that, and then it's a solid, and that is a regulatory condition. So that is something that's a daily occurrence, that they have to go in and spray all those down and scrub them out every once in a while. We're gonna actually cover those, and the reason is sunlight is the big driver. This is algae, basically. And so we'll eliminate that, and that also helps in the wintertime to minimize freezing conditions out there as well. So those are the phase 1As. And then we looked at phase 2. And if you look at the aeration basin being the workhorse, you can notice we're effectively gonna double the capacity of this plant. But there's other conditions within that, which we do have. Luckily, when this was designed 20-plus years ago, there was some of that forethought that was brought forward on this. And so we will look at some of the grit classifier and components in the headworks. One other thing I'll note that is a little newer as we've gone through more, on 2.1, we're also, the headworks building it's a very aggressive environment. It's raw wastewater going through there. There's mechanical failures that have gone through there because it's just a rough environment. And it's also actually eaten up into the soffit because the aeration, the air change equipment is not working as well. So we're gonna probably push that one. That may be one we wanna push forward a little bit more, a little quicker.
Is that a special structural issue, or?
It's not structural, it's metal in an aggressive environment. And the air change, there's equipment in there that's pulling air through and trying to, inside sometimes it just doesn't last very long. And so it doesn't operate great. The staff does a good job of opening and keeping that aerated, open to air as much as they can, but certain times you've got to close that system. So we're going to look at some different things. We'll talk a little bit more about those in the next meeting here. So we're also going to look at an expansion of the digester. So we've already, in the phase 1 portion, we already identified to double the size of the workhorse, the aeration basin. Well, as flows continue to go in, we're going to generate more solids. And another part of this whole improvement aspect is to meet regulatory conditions of nutrient removal, new EPA guidelines, or not guidelines, requirements. And that will create a proportional more solids than what we currently are doing out of the facility right now. So at a point in the near future could be 3, 5, 10 years. It'll be based on flow and how that operational will probably look to expand and double the size of that digester, okay? The class project 2.3 is a clarifier expansion. Similarly, those clarifiers were sized, each one of those, it's a redundant system. So now you have 2 that are in operation that serves 1 basin. If one of those clarifiers go down, it can still handle hydraulically the water that comes through the one. If we double the workhorse, at some point, we're gonna get to a point that we'll probably need to add a 3rd clarifier, so you have 1 dedicated to each and you have a swing, okay? And then 2.4 is also a regulatory condition that will be, I will say, more prescribed and scheduled by KDHE, but it'll also be looked on as how the new system operates and how efficient it can really be and what wastewater we're having come in. The chemical feed will be more specific directly towards phosphorus, which is a nutrient removal component. And so it's an if and when type of a scenario. So once again, that's kind of the alternatives as we've gone through. If there's any question from the council or the public on any of those.
We've looked at this multiple times, and it doesn't appear that anything's changed much from the
No, not a
two
whole
or
lot.
3 times we've already been through it.
Right.
So nothing stands out to me, at least of how I remember, so,
Yep, we're still going down the
and the
same track.
order is still basically the same.
Yeah, we'll talk a little nuance on that in the public hearing, but.
Anything else, council? All right, we'll close the public meeting and move on to the public hearing. Item B on the agenda, present and discuss the proposed improvements for the wastewater treatment plant project with improvements funded under the low-interest state revolving loan fund program through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. This hearing is now open. Is there anyone who cares to speak? We'll start with you, Mr. Monaco.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we kind of went through the alternatives that we discussed and what we're currently in process of proposing to improve at this point and as part of the SRF application is on the last page here. And what that includes is, once again, doubling the size of the workhorse, the aeration basin, doing the sludge aerobic digester upgrades, the aeration part of that, the pink. And then the SCADA improvements, the influent pump station, the UV system upgrades, those were all phase 1. Those were all phase 1 projects. The Headworks building is a combination of the screening and the HVAC and soffit. Those are partially of phase 1A and of 2-1. So the HVAC and the soffit was kind of what I was talking about with the air changes and the aggressive atmosphere. So what we're currently in process of doing is changing the conditioning of that space. Instead of having equipment inside, physically inside the building, it will be outside the building. So that will help alleviate that aggressive atmosphere that equipment has to live in. And then we'll be working on the soffit conditions. There's nothing structural that we see there, but metal's being eaten away, and so we're gonna aesthetically get that fixed back up. So that's kind of a little difference of where we've been at before. It's, as we went out and looked at it again, it's just it's more of a near term than we thought it might have been. So we're going to include the return activated sludge pump upgrade. That's the square down by the clarifiers. That's already set up, so that we'll effectively just be putting in a new pump as we go through there. And once again, you only have one pump of that type, so this will provide redundancy. But we're gonna be a new pump supporting a 20-plus-year-old pump. So that will be a good component for that. And then the UV and the clarifier upgrades, once again, the clarifier will be covering that, those launders that will help that efficiency. Now, one of the things that we need to discuss as part of the public hearing is kind of, I'm gonna have an update kind of in the process, and then also some scheduling components as we go through there. So the application was submitted in September. There's their side of the administrative. We're currently working on the administrative side as well for the city. This is part of that process. We have environmental review questions out and responses requested from the state agencies and federal agencies that are prescribed by KDHE as part of this process. I do not expect anything to come of that. This is already an existing facility, so it's just a process of that. But one thing to talk about is the application went in with, for a total project amount of $5,967,100, of which the city is requesting or have applied for $5 million worth of the state revolving loan fund. At the time I prepared a memo for staff with this, we didn't have updates for what the November rates are. They currently are 2.36 is the interest rate through the low interest loan program. That is for a 20-year time period, okay? But like I said, the application has gone in for the amount of 500 or 5 million. What will happen is, once again, this is administrative side, but there is still a schedule side of what we'll look at as we go through there. We'll go through, the expectation right now is KDHE has their programming that they have to go through. They will develop a draft agreement that they will come back to the city and have you review, your city attorney review, and you guys will have an opportunity as a governing body to review, evaluate, and officially approve that when that comes. The interest rate will be what it is for that month, whatever month that is. If it's January, if it's February, whatever that month is, that's the rate that you will get. And that agreement will actually include a payback schedule will be incorporated as part of that. So what we would look at is, let's an assumption that that process is done on KDHE's side. We get that, we approve that in January, or excuse me, in February. Then we would probably turn around and advertise for the bidding contractors very shortly thereafter. So we may be looking at a March, maybe April timeframe for a bidding, which will allow the contracting components and everything to be done, and they're ready to go full bore in the summer months, which obviously have longer days and is more efficient on the construction side. So we'll go through that. The expected construction activities are 8 to 10 months, depending upon when we fully get into that. Maybe if it pushes us into winter months, there might be a short delay of something, but we also have some inside work that can be done. So if, you know, one of the things that we would highly suggest is the engineer that they focus on the outside work, get it done, kind of like building a house, get it closed in, and then you can work if the weather isn't perfect. So, but one of the components that we need to talk about as part of this public hearing is the potential increase or impact on wastewater rates within the city. And that's part of the prescription. And I'm going to turn this over to Dan, and he's going to kind of go through that.
Thanks, Daniel. I just have 2 or 3 slides to jump through to give the council just a quick recap of where we've been with our rate structure. And again, like Daniel said, where we anticipate going with the progress of this project, phases 1 and 2. So what you can see on this slide is an illustration of a timeline of the recent rate adjustments for our water and sewer utilities. You can see back in 2008 until about 2017, rate adjustments were made incrementally in each case, typically either once or twice a year or at most every 2 to 3 years. At that time, the city had not completed a formal comprehensive rate structure analysis, and that was completed, as some of you will remember very clearly, in 2019 with the assistance of Carl Brown with the company GettingGreatRates.com. That rate analysis provided a different structure entirely. Instead of incremental percentage changes to the per 1,000 gallon or minimum monthly charges for the water and sewer purchases by our customers. A quick recap again of that methodology used in 2019 for the rates that were put into place in early 2020. Data collection and sharing with the consultant, putting that into a cost of service model. When this rate structure was analyzed, the city's customer portfolio looked a little bit different. We had, I would say, a larger share of our usage driven by residential customers in particular, in the size of our utilities. And that's obviously a changing condition that with the development activity at the business park in an urban HES, make a big change, and then we'll be forecasting that growth over time a lot more closely. Looking at our initial draft, and in May of 2019, we had a work session with the city council. Feedback was taken into account, and then in December of 2019, the final report was adopted in the form of rates, which went into effect in February of 2020. At that time, the city was in a strong position, but that continued to grow over the past several years. We've looked at our fund balances in our budget work sessions and have scheduled in the coming months, especially as we target retirement or long-term financing options of our obligations for the remaining share of the water tower project, as well as this project that Daniel's gone through tonight and the schedule that he's talked about tonight. One thing that staff do want to propose is that we re-engage with Carl Brown to reassess with our changing conditions what sort of a rate model adjustment do we need to be looking ahead at. In terms of financial returns, the last 2 years, our two utilities have had strong performance and continue to build reserve levels in exceedance of our current reserve targets or requirements by policy. When we look at our timeline again, every 3 to 4 years was our typical practice at the longest, and we're now at next year going to be at a little over 4 years from the last comprehensive analysis. So that's an item that we'll hope to discuss more with the council and looking at whether there's funding identified for completing that step again. A real quick recap of where our rates are today. I apologize for the small font, but they are, for water and sewer both, determined according to the meter size or your respective ability to draw from our utilities. Monthly minimums are set by meter size, as well as the system development fees for connecting into the city's utilities. So those go up as the size of your meter goes up. Our per 1,000 gallons water and sewer charge remains flat, and that is consistent with our old rate structure. But otherwise, it's a very different approach than we had historically with the city's utilities. When we look ahead at the 2024 budget, we don't anticipate and we don't have budgeted any utility rate change to accommodate the cost of this project. Like Daniel just mentioned in the timing, our loan agreement is due to be finalized early next year with KDHE. That would help us identify our final interest rate, but at the same time, as we talked about in budget work sessions, we have a significant decrease in water and sewer utility debt on the books right now. Our debt service obligations by year fall off dramatically, and so we're able to fold in ongoing payments for this new round of capital cost without seeing what we believe to be much, if any, increase to the rate structure over the next 10 to 20 years that this step would take place. A couple other considerations about the structure of the long-term financing through this loan program. Early repayment is offered without penalty, and you only issue as you incur those costs. So all 10 million or 10 plus million won't be drawn and be due upon for payment initially. It'll be as the project completes and goes through the process, which again helps us reach those 2 to 3 year windows when our debt service obligations fall off significantly. Happy to take any questions you have, but again, that's just a quick update on our rate structure and proposed or anticipated changes down the road.
Do you mind providing that? I mean, it is obviously pretty
Yeah.
hard to see.
It would be nice if we could come up with a standard type size for graphics or something on sometime.
Sure.
It'd be nice to do. Thank you.
Certainly. We'll share some information about all this and the slides.
Cool. Any further questions or anything further for staff?
Will we be able to get that from when we float out for bid and construction? That's a pretty short time frame. I think what you said was
We'll have
we'll go to bid in March and start construction, going to let for bidding in March.
Well, yes, we will have a minimum of a 30-day advertisement for the bidders. And then at that point,
So it's a 30-day turnaround to start.
Well, no, the advertisement is once we have KDH approval on the design and we have, the approval of the loan agreement, then we'll put in the paper, we're gonna advertise for bidders. We prepare the bidding documents, that we'll come back with and work through with city staff as well. But then that goes out for a minimum of 30 days. They have the opportunity to develop and get their bid put together, similarly as other public utility needs. We will then have the bid letting. We will make recommendation and come back to you as the governing body to make that recommendation. You guys then would award. It's usually a 10 to 15 day process. Then we'll come back, we'll get the final, we'll do a notice to proceed, pre-construction. There's pieces and parts out there. There is some big pieces of equipment that may take some time, but that's part on the front end that they will do their submittal process to get those items in and approved as quickly as possible so that they can then go out as part of their program. And, they'll be in charge of their timeline, but all of them are pretty good about knowing, hey, this may take 6 months to get this pump, so I'm gonna order it right at the beginning. But there's some pipe work, there's electrical, there's differing things out there. Obviously, the basin will be a major undertaking, several thousand yards of concrete, and it's not flat, it's walls at differing depths and different things.
Are there any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, then I will close the public hearing on this item. Thank you, Mr. Monaco. Excellent work. Shall we move on to item C?
Yep, we sure can.
Okay. Ordinance 1516, consider approval of voluntary annexation petition for Harmon Farms replat lots 1 through 3 and 4 and properly addressed as 00000 Chieftain Road, Tonganoxie, Kansas 66086 with parcel ID 1942. You can read the rest. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor. So this item may be somewhat familiar. The City Council had taken previous action to send a resolution for annexation of a 14-acre parcel, which is identified as, this is the county GIS map that's shown, and so it's number 7, which is just to the north of County Road 1, which is also called Honey Creek Road here. And so the county had 30 days to consider our resolution. The county staff presented that with about 7 days left in that 30-day timeline to the Board of County Commissioners about 2 weeks ago. And there was a lot of discussion. The county commissioners don't necessarily approve or do anything with it other than make a recommendation to either accept the annexation or not. And so we were provided with a resolution of why the Board of County Commissioners chose to not move forward with the recommendation. And that included things like not having all the roads that the county wanted fully annexed into the city. The proposed annexation would have hindered the extension of public utilities to the area. Although county staff never reached out to us, clearly this project itself is shoring up electrical service to the southern part of the county, and we have all the other utilities are stubbed literally across the street. But for whatever reason, that was included. We didn't necessarily disagree that just annexing one 14-acre piece might have created an irregular boundary for the city. So, but in considering it and then going back and talking to the property owner that owns the majority of this stuff that's in blue, we did discuss just fully voluntarily annexing that entire area into the city to where the city could be an active partner with the property owner in planning and zoning and determining the end use, and ultimately getting to the point where it's a little more acceptable if we were going to be required to accept all of these road right-of-ways, that the city had some engagement or involvement in how those, both sides of the road would develop. It still doesn't discount the fact that there's thousands of acres of county property that's, and residents that use that roadway to get to their properties, but that is out of our sole discretion, I guess is the nicest way to put that. There's one carve out on this, and that's for a piece that was sold to a private landowner there. It's just a single family residence. I think there's a home with a barn, and they're not proposing any change of use there, so it is a carve out for now. So what changed and why we couldn't go this path the first time, so where the cursor is and you see number 7 highlighted, it is not adjacent to any existing city limits. And so that, to simplify it as best as I can, and Anna could provide the full legal explanation, we could not move forward with a city annexation. What changes now is that large 51-acre piece that is directly across from the business park does share a property line with existing city limits, i.e. the business park. And so since the rest of the properties that are being proposed for annexation are contiguous to that piece, that provides us this opportunity tonight to solely consider it for annexation into the city. The county will likely come back into the picture with some of their concerns about road right-of-ways, although we'll address as much as we can through annexation. But eventually, if this property sells or moves forward with development and there's a plat filed, those county concerns will undoubtedly reappear, and we'll have to be prepared to address those. But the city, our staff is supporting moving forward with this because it gets, like I said, it provides the opportunity for the city to be a partner in how this is going to eventually develop, and ultimately gets Evergy that chance to get moving on the substation, which they've said can take up to 2 years to complete. And at the end of the day, we want to not only improve the electrical service for all of our residents, but we want to shore up the south part of the county as well. Be happy to answer any additional questions, and Anna, I know, has worked diligently on this and has a lot of detail in case you have any other specific questions.
Council, do you have any questions?
I think it's a great idea. I have no questions.
Anyone else?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, I will entertain a motion if there are no more further questions.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ordinance 1516 to consider approval of voluntary annexation petition for Harmon Farms, replat lots 1, 3, and 4, and property addressed as 0000 Chieftain Road, Tonganoxie, Kansas, with parcel ID 194200000001000.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. On to item D, consider action associated with the real estate contract of sale between the city and Unilock Chicago Incorporated. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Ms. Kerslick did prepare an extensive memo that outlines some of the history with this. So as we're all aware, Unilock was the first tenant in the business park. They essentially purchased a 34-acre parcel. They requested at the time that they purchased it to be able to split their development project into 2 phases. The first phase would be to establish a sales office for the western region, and that would include a sales yard from which they could distribute their product to that western region market. The second phase then would be to move forward with an investment that would create a manufacturing plant. There were some provisions in there. There was performance criteria that were submitted during the negotiations by Unilock. So in simplest terms, what type of sales would Unilock have to hit to move forward with the investment to build a manufacturing plant? So over the course of time, since 2018, when this project was initially approved, early 2018, The city council had granted 2 extensions to Unilock to allow an additional 18-month period per each extension before the deadline for them to move forward with that second phase would come into play. And so that is what the upcoming November 30th deadline represents, was that second extension. So again, we're 5 years down the road, 5+ years down the road from when this was originally approved. And again, the goal was to create a manufacturing plant with jobs. Unilock has indicated that they've met the performance goals that they had originally put in the development agreement, but they are not able to commit to moving forward with a manufacturing plant. When you look at Unilock, just if you Google it, you'll probably notice that they just opened a plant outside of Cincinnati. It services a different region. In July, I believe, of 21, they made another announcement that they were going to build a new plant in Virginia. Again, it's another region, but we've asked for some level of communication to have a better understanding of why this location that services the western region is being bypassed or jumped over by the corporate decision makers in terms of where that next capital investment is going to go. And we're obviously we're not privy to that information, and I guess the best thing I can say is they're non-committal about when that commitment could happen. So at this time, let me backtrack just a little bit. So within the development agreement, there's really 2 options that are at the city's sole discretion. One is that Unilock would pay us a premium based, that premium is what the difference is between the $10,000 that they paid us originally for the property versus what the current market value would be of the property for the entirety of the area. Or that the city could request to have a little over 17 acres of that property returned to us. So within the development agreement, and it's in the packet, it divides the property into a northern portion and a southern portion. If staff is making the recommendation to move forward with notifying them that we would like the 17.65 acres return, exercising our reversionary interest in the property. If we do that and we would provide notice to Unilock, they then have at their sole discretion the opportunity to ask for an additional 4.5 acres, which essentially squares off the north and south portion. And if they ask for that, they would also have to pay a premium to us. And then if they did that, then we, rather than getting 17 acres, we're getting 13 acres and some change back. As far as the way that the business park was platted, that remainder property, whether it's 17 acres or 13 acres, has direct access to 222nd Street, and we could move forward with marketing that for an additional use or as an additional property parcel that would be available within the lot. We'd have to do a little survey work. There wasn't a lot of legal descriptions other than some approximate measurements that were shown in the development agreement, because I think everybody thought that eventually this project would move forward and we would never have to be at this crossroad. But nonetheless, here we are. That's why we put the protections in for the city to be able to move forward, because again, at the end of the day, our goal was to put large capital investment in the business park that created job opportunities for our residents and the county residents as well. So I know I kind of went over that pretty quickly. Again, there's a lot of legal discussion in the memo that Anna prepared. Be happy to address anything I just said, or if you have additional questions that anyone on staff might be able to answer, we'd be happy to do that.
Council, do you have any questions?
I have a comment. I think we've fulfilled our end of the bargain more than should even be required. I'd like to see economic development. There's nobody in this room that champions it more than I. But also there comes a point in time where they need to do what they're supposed to do or not. And it appears to me that they're not going to do it. And there are opportunities for our taxpayers for us to put more businesses out there. And I think we need the property back and move on. We appreciate what they've done, which I do. But there's just, I mean, it's pretty obvious they're not going to do anything, and if we haven't bent over backwards to make it work for them, I would say, let's wait, but I think we've done our part and more, so that would be my opinion.
Well said, Mr. Donnelly.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'd accept a motion.
We'll make sure we get that right.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to, based with the real estate contract of the sale between the city and Union Lock, to convey the remainder of the 17.6 acres back to the city of Tonganoxie per the revisionary portion of the contract.
Second.
Does that motion fit what needs to be done?
The motion would be to direct staff, I mean, yes,
Direct
that's the
staff
direction
to
for staff. Yeah.
convey that that is our plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item
Thank you, George.
E.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Item E, consider approval of quote for compensation analysis update.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. So just real quickly, this item relates back to a compensation study that we did a couple of years ago where we hired a third-party firm to look at our classification or job titles and the compensation rates we were paying at that time and see how we compared as an employer to other municipalities in our region. And it was always contemplated that within that, there was a recommendation to go out as frequently as every year, but as infrequently as every other year or every third year. And we're getting to that point. So we know that during COVID and post-COVID, there were some significant market adjustments made from employers. And we've certainly taken steps to preserve 5%, the potential for 5% annual increases. We use part of our CARES Act funds to pay a premium back to the employees for their service during those COVID periods. And so, but what we're coming up to is the point of, you'll probably recall during this last summer's budget discussions, we were trying to anticipate what that might look like if we move forward. So you'll probably notice that in the agenda packet, the proposal's dated from June. That's because we reached back out to the same firm to see what they would charge. And so essentially, it's a $10,000 fee to reassess the market and see what adjustments, if any, need to be made on the compensation side. So this time, we're not looking at classifications or job titles. We've not had any significant adjustments in the organization since we've done that. This would simply focus on the compensation piece. And so as we develop the budget, you all as a group approved budget adjustments into next year's budget that kind of anticipated potential changes. So this would allow us the opportunity to go pursue that. And why I'm asking for it before year end to do this is because there's a significant portion of our most tenured employees who will have reviews coming due in January. And so we're hopeful that we can get this data out from the market in a fairly quick fashion so that we can implement those changes, whatever they may be, early in the year and account for that as we move forward rather than having to do back pay if someone was due that. And so we have budget funds this year to move forward with the $10,000, so we're asking you for that approval tonight.
Okay, council, any questions?
Real quick, George, since we're doing the entire staff, including Public Works, can we, I assume you're intending to pay this all out of general fund, but can we shift some of that over to other funds? Just because it is paying for some of that. I mean, that would make sense to me to try to proportionately distribute that cost between funds.
We can definitely do that. We proportionally distribute a lot of costs according to that model, and we'll follow that with this payment as well. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I would accept a motion.
I hate spending $10,000, but I make a motion that we approve the $10,000, where is that at? It's in here somewhere. Well, that we approve the $10,000 study by
Logic compensation.
Logic, yep.
Okay, is that acceptable, Ms. Krislich? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item F is the city manager agenda. Mr. Brajkovic, Mr. Porter.
Yep, just one item, and Mr. Porter's going to tackle it.
Yep, I'll handle this very quickly. I believe, I hope we're winning all the games that all of us are eagerly waiting to get back to. But our October financial report is included in your agenda packets on the dais and online for review. Through the end of the month of October, we're a little over 83% of the way through the fiscal year. We've collected just less than 90%, 87% of revenues across all funds, and only spent 79% of expenditure budget across all funds. I won't highlight too much more from the executive summary, but I will note that we've published our notice of public hearing as required for an amendment to the Capital Projects Fund budget. This is to account for several items in this late summer and fall that the City Council prioritized moving forward with, sometimes more quickly than anticipated. And those included repairs to the roof of this building that are covered by insurance but need to be covered in terms of expense authority in a city fund. And so that cost, which we hope to still be completed with that project by the end of this year, will be part of that adjustment. And then in addition to that, moving forward with 4th Street Bridge design engineering and geotechnical work, both of which have been approved by the City Council in the last several months. As we got closer to year end, it became apparent we would be close or exceeding our expense authority in that fund. So we've got that published, and then we'll also provide you some notes at the next City Council meeting, December 4th, about adjustments in the public safety department equipment funds for grant awards that require matching funds as well as expense before reimbursement for things like radios, thermal imaging equipment, and some really cool and exciting projects. So we'll have more information about that for you all at the December 4th meeting with that budget amendment as included in the newspaper notification and what will be posted on the website. I'll skip forward in the report to the sales tax section, the major revenues section detail. As you can see, we still maintain progress on the city and the share of the county side that's in exceedance of budget as well as last year's actual. And we're very excited to see that status and in comparison to last year's actual as well. But I want to point your attention to a page with two large charts on it. One's entitled City Sales and Use Tax Receipts, and the other is Share of the County Sales and Use Tax Receipts. And you can see on there history since January of 2016 through the October receipt of this year, the monthly remittance amount for each of those subcategories. And you do see positive trends over that entire time period. When you break it out in other ways, like 3-month rolling average, you still see positive trends. And so we wanted to highlight sort of graphically or pictorially to you all, one, that change in time and how that's been constant, but two, some of the volatility that we've seen in monthly collections in 2023 and 2022. We'll have a spike one month and a lot lower the next month. Those returns make it a little bit harder to forecast long-term where we are, but that is interesting to note, a big discrepancy in just a 6-7 year window in terms of the pace of these monthly remittances we're receiving. As we've mentioned before too, we are going to be completing more analysis of the remittance data that we're allowed to collect from the State Department of Revenue, and so we'll be sharing that with you all in upcoming monthly financial reports to the extent that we can. I won't belabor the rest, but there are other pages about items such as fund balance and all of our city funds, as well as expense authority remaining. And again, as we closer to the end of the year, we are drawing closer to our expense limits, but we are in good position and hope to end the year right on track. But happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Any questions? I see none. City attorney agenda.
No items, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem agenda.
No items.
City council agenda.
None.
I have so much to say, but I'll save it for another day and turn this over to Jake.
Oh, well, thank you.
Welcome.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
We don't have a second person here, so we have to stay.
That's right.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, go Chiefs.
Aye.